Good morning and good afternoon. Today I have the pleasure to talk to Art King. He's in the In-Building Networks group at Corning. And we're talking today about CBRS. CBRS is launched commercially, so now it's a reality after years of work, and this is all very exciting. And so I'm talking to Art today to find out what is that he is doing at Corning right now. So Art, thanks for talking to us today.
Monica, pleasure to catch up with you, and especially on this important topic. So I'm part of the Corning in-Building Technologies group, and I came into Corning via the Spider Cloud Wireless acquisition. So we were acquired in 2017 as part of the Corning's search to have a signal source to be a companion to their DAS technology. And so, we provide kind of an end-to-end solution package for the industry, both in CBRS and licensed spectrum, of course. So that's kind of a thumbnail introduction.
Yeah, that's a much broader scope that you have now at Corning. So what is that? Can you tell us what is it you're doing specifically on CBRS? Can you give us a little bit more detail?
Well, in CBRS, we have a shipping platform that's specifically targeted at the indoor market, and we're seeing quite a few trial sites up and running, and various different prototypes. And a lot of the prototype activity is happening in the industrial space and within IoT specifically, and mainly it's because of the lack of UEs available for the actual mobile devices. The Pixel 3 and maybe the Samsung is now available with CBRS support, but in quite a few of the use cases, the IoT vendors have a really tight turning radius and can add the chip to their boxes fairly quickly. And we're also seeing gateway devices develop that have a radio on them and an Ethernet port. So a lot of the legacy devices that industry has invested in for their wired infrastructure can be brought into this environment fairly easily.
Yeah, so let's get to the network in a minute, but let me ask you a question about the devices. As you say, it's pretty easy to add a CBRS in the devices, and this is an important issue because oftentimes I get the question of, well, we might have a network, but do we have devices? And so how do you see that in terms of, can the enterprise upgrade what they currently have? Do we need new devices? How do you see it from, obviously you're more of an infrastructure person, but how do you see that developing? Is that going to be something that is going to slow down CBRS?
Well, in the enterprise world, you tend to have device turnover about 3% per month, something like that. So, it takes a good 18 months before you've even turned over half of your devices. And with CBRS, you have to have a device that has the radio included in it. So, if the device doesn't have the radio, even if someone does a device refresh, they won't have the radio on board necessary to get to CBRS. So, this is the reality of where things are today for the generic enterprise. And that's why private LTE is taking a lot of focus right now, because even if you need mobiles for that, you can buy them as part of the business case to build out the private LTE infrastructure, where if you're in a corporate carpeted floor, you really can't mandate BYOD employees to go spend their money to buy a new cell phone, because it won't be end of life for them, and they probably won't be very happy being essentially forced to go buy a new phone.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is all this. So you mentioned private LTE. How do you see the balance between private LTE and public infrastructure? Why are we talking about private LTE? Why can't mobile operators go and build all the infrastructure?
Well, there's like three major use cases for CBRS. There's private LTE, essentially a closed network with its own EPC and private SIMs that really don't touch the outside world. There's the public spectrum, say like you're a mobile operator and you want to use CBRS as secondary spectrum indoors, so you don't have to worry about macro effects and those kinds of things when you're doing engineering work and or worried about signal leaking from the building. So you can use CBRS as second spectrum. And then there's the kind of the enterprise holy grail implementation, which is the neutral host version, where in theory, every mobile device that comes into the building can roam onto that CBRS network and have service in the building. And that last use case of the neutral host it's somewhat defined technically, but from a business perspective, it really hasn't been completely nailed down yet. There's a lot of push and a lot of work in the background, both by enterprises and a lot of key customers to try and make it real. But it's going to take some time to mature and potentially appear in the market. So, failing that, the private LTE has a lot of use cases and it has a lot of traction, and there's a huge amount of interest in it from IT people, system architects, and people that have business cases that need to be solved where they're trying to replace wired network cables to increase the agility of their operation. In the world we live in, Wi-Fi is doing what Wi-Fi can do, and it kind of complements LTE, and LTE is going to be used to start divesting of things that are cabled right now where uncabling them to Wi-Fi wasn't viable, either for system timing, system performance reasons, and or just straight distance constraints where you couldn't reach a half mile with a Wi-Fi signal. So it's really, the business case is essentially eliminating the huge cost of pulling cables, especially in explosion type environments where you have to have conduits and quite a few things in place to protect against explosions, like in underground mines in particular.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a very important point that you raised, because oftentimes CBRS is compared or cast against the Wi-Fi. So why do you need CBRS if you have Wi-Fi? So let's address that, and then we'll get to the wireline thing. So why do we need CBRS if you have Wi-Fi?
Well, I should, just pull out my yin and yang drawing that shows Wi-Fi and LTE together. So, to be tongue in cheek, I think, in the future, the network will have a well-balanced diet of both LTE and Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi has a jillion devices available. Enterprises know how to run it, and it's hugely dominant, and it's not going to be replaced. And but there's use cases where it doesn't make sense to do something on Wi-Fi, and in that case, what you're trying to do with LTE is not push Wi-Fi out of the way, but replace things that could not migrate to Wi-Fi and didn't, they were mission critical for many reasons. And again, it's system architects that make determinations, and they ask hard questions, like, do you have guaranteed access to bandwidth? Can you guarantee me this? Can you guarantee me that? And maybe with AX, some of these things will change where you're going to have a more deterministic MAC layer, but right now with the present generation of technology, private LTE has a nice fit both for determinism and also latency, and all the native built-in QoS features, encryption and security features. There's a lot of things that come in native with cellular due to the privacy and security and fraud prevention things that we inherit from the carrier market that are just well engineered natively into cellular gear that tend to be layers of security that are added by onto Wi-Fi technology.
Absolutely, but so from the Wi-Fi point of view, it's like there's no real substitute. So they need to Wi-Fi and CBRS will coexist. Now, with wireline seems different though. However, because CBRS can be a replacement for wireline, right? And as you say, is it just a cost issue, complexity? Because wireline does a very good job at being secure and reliable.
Well, So let's talk about some of the things that we've seen with manufacturing floors. And one group of people we were talking to have industrial robots. Now, the robots move constantly and they end up wearing out network cables. So you end up where putting a wireless box on it is practical because the motion of the robot constantly wears the cable out, and you're not going to wear out the cable when you've just got a network box hanging on the side of it. So that that's and as you talk to the customers, these are discoveries we make on the technology side because we don't have a view to the unsolved problems that enterprises and IT people are struggling with in their particular ecosystem. The same thing with the underground mining, and with that, it's the cost and complexity of pulling conduits and protecting against explosions is so high that there's a huge benefit to actually just putting everything on wireless and communicating that way, so that you don't have the labor and electrician cost of all the putting fixed infrastructure in place. And then every time you reconfigure the mine or reconfigure something underground, you end up having to pull people back in and rebuild all the conduit paths and everything. So it really allows businesses to reconfigure themselves effectively without a lot of the costs that they have today around making an electrician follow behind them and reconfigure all the network paths.
Yeah. So it's more than just like the immediate cost savings that it costs more or less. It's a real different way to run things. You have a more dynamic environment in the enterprise. And so wireless is much more better suited for that. And that, goes beyond CBRS. And so it's a global kind of thing. So in other countries where they do not have CBRS, what do you see them doing?
Well, so you have places where either the operator or the regulator are taking some of today's spectrum and allocating it for use in private infrastructure. In southern Germany, the industry collaboration to digitize a lot of the German infrastructure in the heavy industry is a great example of kind of cross collaboration amongst an industry. And I think that they're going to bring a lot of lessons to the table to all of us globally around the benefits of competitors collaborating to get economies of scale around some of these technologies that they need for kind of the private industrial space. And in places where the operator is carving off spectrum, the beauty of that is UEs are available because it's in the operator spectrum. So they'll run the SIMs for you. They'll run the EPC. They'll take care of all the backend infrastructure. They'll provide you a nicely provisioned, LTE network, but they can also provide all the mobile devices to it, and potentially all the IoT devices that exist for their network can be brought to bear on the customer's problem that they're trying to solve with a private network. So it's at a global level. A lot of the innovation thinking and a lot of the things happening in shared spectrum in the U.S. Translate well to private LTE in either shared spectrum or licensed spectrum in other parts of the globe.
Yeah, and which is good because you don't want to have yes, it's a big market, but you want to be in line so that whatever solution you have here is available other places, so it's a bigger market to start with. Now,
Right.
And actually, so sort of going back to the devices, but it's actually from a network point of view. If you have a private LTE network, the enterprise might want to be able to use and leverage the devices that their employees have, as you suggested. How can they do that if it's a private network and your device is going to be working everywhere?
It seems like at this point the answer to that is the dual SIM devices. Until the neutral host situation is squared away and well understood, the dual SIM devices have the potential to be that bridge. And the other thing that this brings to mind around the employees is what we're potentially seeing in healthcare. So in healthcare, that's fairly interesting in larger facilities where clinical wireless devices have been built and are attached to Wi-Fi. And you've got, hundreds of patients laying in their beds watching YouTube and videos and everything else, and Netflix and, Amazon Prime, et cetera, all from their bed. And you've got all the employees and all their guests on Wi-Fi at the same time. And so the clinical devices are competing against that. And there's conversations where people are looking at, can I take a clinical wireless device and put it on clean spectrum within CBRS? And, will we end up with all the medical wireless devices shipping dual stack with CBRS and Wi-Fi? So if you have an uncongested environment and Wi-Fi, put it on Wi-Fi. And if you're in a competitive environment like a larger facility, you can put all your clinical wireless devices on clean spectrum. And the nice thing with private LTE is, because of HIPAA regulations, you're going to keep all the traffic inside the building, and the traffic won't leave the building, so you don't have to worry about regulatory issues, because you're going to keep it inside your building, and the scope of your HIPAA audits will continue to be within the structure and within IT controlled infrastructure, and not including a public provider.
Absolutely. Now that's now the healthcare environment is a very interesting one, because you have really tough requirements, a lot of different users. So that would suggest that, a combination of private networks and neutral host would be good. But as you mentioned, the neutral host is not quite there yet. Do you think
Right.
How important is going to be both, for CBRS and in general for in-building coverage? Is that the model? Is that the way of the future?
It's unknown. We in our market in the United States, our providers compete on network quality and network reach, and thematically, could it make sense to have shared infrastructure inside buildings? Yes, it could, but what we see even with small cells, in our experience with small cells on the SpiderCloud product family, is the design strategy between operators is different. Every operator has a slightly different configuration that they'd like to see the network design in. And even if we're going to CBRS and we've got a shared environment, whose design strategy is going to be used to implement the actual underlying LTE infrastructure that's carrying the CBRS. So even the blocking and tackling of network design needs to be thought through when you start actually sharing the environment, because the operator community, when their name is advertised in the upper left-hand corner of the phone, they have veto authority over whether or not the network's going to carry their traffic, because they want their brand experience to be awesome. And that it's going to be a journey to get a lot of this defined, but it's really there's a lot more things to unpack here to get to the destination.
Yeah. So what do you think? Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense, and I think it's as I say, we don't know the answer, but it's a crucial question that at some point we need to be able to address, and we'll see. So from the mobile operator point of view, what do you think? What is the expectation of what they will be doing? Because clearly they can have like CBRS in public areas, but with respect to the enterprise, how are they going to manage that?
Well, CBRS is just ideally suited for indoors. I mean, when you do engineering work for indoor systems, you have to achieve what's called macro dominance, where you have a certain dB more internal signal, so that you capture the mobile device and keep them on the indoor network. And there's places in the country New York City in particular, that with the amount of older buildings and essentially, clear glass from a RF perspective, you have to have a boatload of signal to actually, dominate the macro in certain places. And the idea that you could essentially hand into a piece of spectrum that's unused by the macro when you enter the building, that's still the operator's network. It's a very, very nice solution from that perspective. You could end up providing service to a lot more buildings at a lower price point if you were bringing in, CBRS as secondary spectrum for an operator versus attempting to run, co-channel with the macro and have to, provide the power levels necessary to dominate the macro.
Yeah, absolutely. But will they pay for it? Will they do it, or will they have the enterprise or venue owners shoulder the cost and then share the infrastructure or use the infrastructure?
That remains to be seen. The pressure that the operators are under right now, we've seen a divergence of capital away from LTE and enterprise and towards a lot of the, getting 5G in place and 5G infrastructure builds. So, the idea that a low-cost LTE solution could be provided today and procured by the enterprise is extremely attractive to a lot of the enterprise IT folks that value LTE and want to satisfy their employees about their, their indoor signal needs. And there's a swing towards enterprise funding on licensed spectrum systems, again, because the capital within the operator community has really moved to 5G. And if you need an interior investment inside your building and you're not a really large customer that can get their attention and get it done, you end up seeking a low-cost solution to solve your problem yourself. That's a solution that's been sanctioned by the operator and approved for connection to their network.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk little bit about what is it you guys at Corning do, because you do have all the experience, all the different bits that to build, the end-to-end solution for CBRS. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is special about your approach to CBRS?
Really, we've built a low-cost indoor system that builds on top of our expertise that we already have around, having our system approved by 3 of the 4 major operators. And I guess maybe the better way to say this, 3 of the 3 major operators, provided Sprint and T-Mo or, complete everything. But, for us to do CBRS, it was build another LTE radio, which we know how to do, and add in the SAS code for the proxy domain to, essentially to get spectrum from the SAS infrastructure. So for us, it wasn't reinvention or inventing something new. It was just another LTE radio and some SAS code. But more importantly, because our LTE infrastructure is approved for connection to the operators, it allowed the operators to also test CBRS with us, very quickly and easily, because it's just another radio. So it has the potential to open up a market for the operator community to provide CBRS for both potentially private LTE and leverage all their backend services, and just public LTE as an extension of the existing network infrastructure on the public side.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's basically, there is a lot of continuity there in terms from a product point of view, but clearly the use cases are new and wider and more interesting.
Well, more interestingly from the operator perspective is, you got to understand, in the enterprise, cellular is like a foreign land. I mean, when I came to Spider Cloud from the enterprise side, the way cellular is discussed on the enterprise is it's Wi-Fi with an insane $50 a month charge, and why would you do that? Right. And then I get to the cellular side and I see, oh my God, this psychotically complex globe-spanning machine that allows me to turn on my phone in every country in the world, and it works. And I drive in my car and carry calls. And the miracle that is cellular is completely not understood by the enterprise, which means that they probably can't build it and operate it themselves with the same level of attention that they do with Wi-Fi today, because it's a totally different world. So the idea that even for private LTE, the operators could provide the back end, the SIM management, the KPIs, and a support desk, it allows them to leverage all their installed infrastructure to, provide new revenue. And, we've done work with Mocken so that you can advertise a private LTE network and the public network of the operator inside the building. So you get a twofer where you can actually layer on a private infrastructure on that's just adjacent and has the same coverage as the public side of the network. So it opens new ways to think about providing more value-added services on top of the same infrastructure investment.
Absolutely, especially for in building, as we said before, because that's really perfect. Let me ask you a final question. What about moving forward? What do you see? CBRS is commercial. What's next?
Well,
what is your roadmap?
There's a huge amount of exciting things happening around CBRS and bringing the 5G waveform onto it. And that's the next frontier for the CBRS Alliance. And so there's going to be 5G coming into the private infrastructure via shared spectrum, in addition to 5G and just regular licensed spectrum. So that whole the whole story of 5G and edge computing, bringing in unprecedented potential access to enterprise infrastructure and shortening latency, could provide more game-changing investments potentially happening within the enterprise itself. What we're seeing in enterprise communications is something that 10 years ago, private data centers in the enterprise were very special beasties, and cloud computing turned it all upside down and changed everything. And we see a cloud computing disruption happening to enterprise communications with the potential of private infrastructure and cellular being brought inside and treated at parity with the rest of the infrastructure. So computing disruption of things like PBXs, private chat stuff, video, it could all be on public services built on top of the phone, because cellular scales to 130, 140 million people, and you've got people building for 50,000 people on an enterprise, and it's hugely costly to do a lot of things that are just native to cellular. So there's a lot of enterprise architects that are thinking about, how do I throw a lot of my communications infrastructure overboard and fully embrace cellular natively, not with client software for my legacy technology, but throw the legacy technology overboard and embrace mobile 100%. So that is a hugely interesting wave that we think that is going to happen, and definitely want to be part of that.
Absolutely. No, and you say it's great because you can the enterprise has the capability to do that, to expand it, what they're doing, without having to build it on their own, something so complicated they can manage. So it's a way to find a common ground that is cost effective and revenue generating for everybody. So,
well, a few years back in the enterprise side, frame relay was the network technology of choice for private networks. And you saw network architects saying, oh, this MPLS stuff, it'll never happen. I mean, the idea that I'm going to exchange IP routing tables with an operator, I don't trust their competence to not down my network all the time with routing problems. 5 years later, MPLS had killed off frame relay because the economics and everything about it just made sense. So I think that we'll see the same kind of embracement of a lot of the cellular things that that a lot of enterprise folks are holding at arm's length right now. And basically, you know, the next generation of IT leaders that's coming in will look at the old technology and look at, you know, why are we still doing this? You know, why can't we throw it overboard? And, you know, it's going to be fun times.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Art, thank you so much for talking to me today, and thank to the audience as well. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Monica. Bye.